The Dhammapada, Chapter 5, Bāla Vagga, Fools. Verse 60. Long is Saṁsāra to those who know not the Dhamma. Digha jagarato ratti, dighang santassa yojanang, digho balanang saṁsāro, saddhammang avijānatam. Long is the night to the wakeful, long is the journey to the weary, long is Saṁsāra to the foolish who know not the sublime truth. The king who craved for another man's wife, Pasenadi. One day, King Pasenadi, while going out in the city, happened to see a beautiful young woman standing at the window of her house, and he instantly fell in love with her. So the king tried to find ways and means of getting her. Finding that she was a married woman, he sent for her husband and made him serve at the palace. Later, the king sent the husband on an impossible mission. The young man had to go to an underground world to collect some lotus flowers and some red earth and return to Savatthi the same evening, in time for the king's bath. The king's intention was to kill the husband if he failed to arrive back in time, and to take the wife for himself. Hurriedly taking a food packet from his wife, the young man set out on his mission. On the way, he shared his food with a traveler. He then threw some rice into the water and said loudly, "O guardian spirits and Nagas inhabiting this river, King Pasenadi has commanded me to get some lotus flowers and red earth for him. I have today shared my food with a traveler. I have also fed the fish in this river. I now share with you the merits of the good deeds I have done today. Please get the lotus and red earth for me." A supernatural being, hearing him, took the appearance of an old man and brought the lotus flowers and the red earth. That evening, King Pasenadi, fearing that the young husband might arrive back in time, had the city gates closed early. The young man, finding the city gates closed, placed the red earth on the city wall and stuck the flowers on the earth. Then he declared loudly, "O citizens, be my witnesses. I have today accomplished my mission in time as instructed. The king, without any justification, plans to kill me." After that, the young man left for Jetavana monastery to take shelter and find solace in the peaceful atmosphere there. Meanwhile, the king, obsessed with his desire, could not sleep, and kept thinking about how he would get rid of the husband in the morning and take his wife. About midnight, he heard some eerie sounds. The king was frightened and did not know what to do. Queen Mallika, the chief consort, advised the king to seek the advice of the Buddha. The Buddha explained that the eerie sounds came from 4 men who had lived an earthly existence during the time of the previous Buddha. They were now suffering in hell due to the bad karma that they had accumulated because of sexual misconduct. The king came to realize the depravity of his actions and the severity of the effect of bad karma. He decided he would no longer crave for another man's wife. After all, it was on account of my intense desire for another man's wife that I was tormented and could not sleep the whole of last night, he reflected. Then King Pasenadi said to the Buddha, "Venerable Sir, now I know how long the night is for one who cannot sleep." The young man who was close at hand also said, "Venerable Sir, because I had traveled a long distance yesterday, I too know how long the journey is to one who is weary. So both the king and his subject benefited from their experiences. Then the Buddha said, Long is Saṁsāra to the foolish who know not the sublime truth. Verse 61. Avoid companionship with the foolish. Charanche nadhigaccheya seyyang sadisang attano ekachariyang dalhang kaira nathi bale sahayata. If, as the disciple fares along, he meets no companion who is better or equal, let him firmly pursue his solitary career. There is no fellowship with the foolish. A disobedient novice monk. When Venerable Mahakassapa was residing near Rajagha, he had 2 young novice monks staying with him. One of them was respectful, obedient, and dutiful, but the other was not. When Venerable Mahakassapa advised the disobedient novice not to neglect his duties, the latter became very offended. One day he went to the house of a lay disciple of the monk, and untruthfully said that Venerable Mahakassapa was ill. Thus he got some choice food from them which was meant for Venerable Mahakassapa, but he ate it on the way. When admonished by Venerable Mahakassapa for this, he was extremely angry. The next day, when Venerable Mahakassapa was out on his alms round, the foolish young novice stayed behind, broke the pots and pans, and set fire to the monastery. When a bhikkhu from Rajagha told the Buddha about this, the Buddha remarked that it would have been much better for Venerable Mahakassapa to live alone than to live with a foolish companion who caused so much destruction. Verse 62. Putta mathi dhana mathi iti bālo vihanyati attahi attano nathi kuto putta kuto dhanam. I have sons, I have wealth. The ignorant man thus thinks he is secured. Indeed, he himself is not his own. How can sons or wealth be his? The fate of a stingy rich man. Ananda. There was once a very wealthy man named Ananda in Savatthi. Although he was wealthy, he was very reluctant to give anything in charity. To his son, Mulasiri, he used to say, "Don't think we are wealthy. We should not be spendthrift. We should always acquire more wealth. Otherwise our wealth will dwindle away." The rich man had buried 5 pots of gold in his house, and he died without revealing their location to his son. This man was reborn in a village of beggars, not far from Savatthi. From the time his mother was pregnant, the income of the beggars decreased, and they thought there must be an unlucky one amongst them. By dividing themselves up into groups and by the process of elimination, they came to the conclusion that the pregnant woman must be the cause of their misfortune. Thus she was driven out of the village. Finally, she gave birth to a son who was ugly and repulsive. If she went out begging by herself, she would get what she had obtained as before. But if she went out with her son, she would get nothing. So, when the boy was big enough, his mother sent him out alone to beg. As he wandered about in Savatthi, he entered his old house in his previous life. When the sons of Mulasiri saw him, They were frightened by his ugly looks and ordered their servants to throw him out of the house. The Buddha, who was on his alms round, saw the incident and asked the Venerable Ananda to fetch Mulasiri. When he came, the Buddha revealed that the young beggar was none other than Mulasiri's own dead father. But Mulasiri could not believe it. So the Buddha directed the young beggar to show where he had buried his 5 pots of gold. Only then did Mulasiri accept the truth, and from that time he became a devoted lay disciple of the Buddha. Verse 63. Wise is he who acknowledges his foolishness. Yo bālo manyati bālyam, pandito vapi tena so, bālo cha panditamani, save baloti vucchati. The fool who knows that he is a fool is for that very reason a wise man. The fool who thinks that he is wise is called a fool indeed. How to differentiate the fools? On one occasion, 2 thieves joined a group of devotees going to the Jetavana monastery, where the Buddha was delivering a discourse. One of them listened attentively to the discourse and soon realized the Dhamma. However, the second thief did not pay any attention to the discourse, and he went about stealing from the devotees. After the discourse, both returned to the house of the second thief, who taunted the first thief. You are so wise, you have no money to buy anything to cook in your house. Hearing this remark, the first thief reflected, he is so foolish to think that he is wise. Then, together with some relatives, he went to the Buddha and related the matter to him. The Buddha explained that the fool who knows that he is a fool can, for that reason at least, be considered a wise man. But the fool who thinks that he is wise is indeed called a fool. Verse 64. A fool cannot appreciate the value of the Dhamma. Yava jivangpi che bālo, panditang pairupasati, naso dhammang vijanati, dabbi suparasang yatha. A fool, even though he is associated with a wise man all his life, does not understand the Dhamma, just as a spoon does not know the taste of soup. Fools cannot realize the Dhamma. Udayi. Venerable Udayi would often go and sit on the platform from which learned monks delivered their discourses. On one occasion, some visiting bhikkhus, taking him for a very learned monk, put to him some questions on the 5 aggregates, or khandhas. Udayi could not answer, because he did not know anything of the Dhamma. The visiting bhikkhus were astonished to find that one staying in the same monastery with the Buddha could know so very little about the mind and elements and 6 senses. To them, the Buddha explained that a fool, even though he is associated with a wise man all his life, does not understand the Dhamma, just as a spoon does not know the taste of soup. Verse 65. The wise can appreciate the Dhamma. Muhuttam api che vinyu panditang pairupasati, Khipang dhammang vijanati, jivha suparasang yatha. An intelligent man, even though he is associated with a wise man only for a moment, quickly understands the Dhamma, just as the tongue knows the taste of soup. The wise can realize the Dhamma. One day, a group of youths from Pāveyaka enjoyed themselves with a courtesan in a forest, and while they were resting, the courtesan ran away with their valuable ornaments. While searching for her in the forest, they met the Buddha. Instead of looking for her further, they diverted their attention and listened attentively to the religious discourse given by the Buddha. After the discourse, they joined the holy order and followed the master to the Jetavana monastery. While staying at the monastery, they strictly observed the austerity or purification practice, Dhuttanga. Later, when the Buddha delivered the Aramatagga Sutta, or Discourse on Countless Existences, all of them attained arahanthood. When other bhikkhus commented that these monks were very quick in attaining arahanthood, the Buddha explained that an intelligent person, even though he is associated with a wise man only for a moment, can easily comprehend the Dhamma, just as the tongue knows the taste of soup. Verse 66. Bitter is the fruit of evil. Charanti Bāla dummedha amitenneva attana karonta papakang kammang yang hoti katukappalang. With themselves as their own enemies, fools lacking in intelligence move about doing evil deeds, which bear bitter fruits. The leper's confidence in the triple gem. Suppabuddha. Suppabuddha, the leper, realized the Dhamma while listening attentively to a discourse given by the Buddha. When the crowd had dispersed, he followed the Buddha to the monastery. Sakka, king of the Devas, wishing to test the leper's confidence in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, appeared to him and said, "You are only a poor man, living on what you get by begging, with no one to fall back on. I can give you immense wealth if you deny the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and say that you have no use for them." Suppabuddha replied, "I am certainly not a poor man, with no one to rely on. I am a rich man. I possess the 7 attributes which noble ones possess. I have confidence, saddha, morality, sila, sense of shame to do evil, hiri, sense of fear to do evil, ottappa, learning, sutta, generosity, chaga, and knowledge, panya." Then Sakka went to the Buddha and related the conversation between himself and Suppabuddha. The Buddha explained to Sakka that it would not be easy even for 100 or 1,000 Sakkas to influence Suppabuddha and keep him away from the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Soon after this, Suppabuddha arrived at the monastery and reported the same story to the Buddha. On his way back from the Jetavana monastery, Suppabuddha died due to an accident influenced by an evil spirit who had been a courtesan in a previous existence. The courtesan had been killed by Suppabuddha, and she had vowed to take revenge on him. When the news of Suppabuddha's death reached the Jetavana monastery, the bhikkhus asked the Buddha where he had been reborn. The Buddha told them that Suppabuddha had been reborn in Tavatimsa Deva realm. The Buddha also explained that he was born a leper because in one of his previous existences he had spat upon a holy man. But after realizing the Dhamma, his mental defilements had been cleared away. Verse 67. Not well done is that deed which causes repentance. Natang kammang katang sadhu yankatva anutappati yassa assumukho rodang vipakang patisevati. That deed is not well done when after having done it one regrets, and when weeping with tearful face one reaps the fruit thereof. How the Buddha saved an innocent farmer. One day, some thieves were dividing some stolen valuables and cash amongst themselves in a field. After the division, they went away, but they accidentally left behind a bag of stolen money. Early in the morning on that day, the Buddha, on surveying the world with his supernatural power, perceived that a farmer cultivating near that field would realize the Dhamma on that very day. So the Buddha went there, accompanied by Venerable Ananda. The farmer, on seeing the Buddha, paid respects to him and continued to plow the field. The Buddha, on seeing the bag of money, commented, "Ananda, look at that very poisonous snake." And Ananda replied, "Venerable sir, yes, it is indeed a very poisonous snake." Then both the Buddha and Ananda continued on their way. The farmer, on hearing the remarks, went to investigate if there really was a snake. Instead, he found the bag of money. He took the bag and hid it. Just then the people who had been robbed came to the field in pursuit of the robbers, and tracing the footprints of the farmer, found the bag of money. They beat up the farmer and took him to the king, who sentenced him to death. They took him to the cemetery to be killed, but the farmer kept on repeating, "Ananda, look at that very poisonous snake. Venerable sir, yes, it is indeed a very poisonous snake." When the king's men heard the above dialogue between the Buddha and Ananda being repeated all the way, they were puzzled and took him back to the king, who guessed that the farmer was calling upon the Buddha as a witness. He was therefore taken to the presence of the Buddha. After hearing from the Buddha everything that had happened in the morning, the king remarked, if he had not been able to call upon the Buddha as a witness to his innocence, this man would have been killed. The Buddha replied, "A wise man should not do anything that he would regret after doing it." Verse 68. Well done is that deed which causes no repentance. Tancha kammang katang sadhu yankatva nanutappati yassa patito sumano vipakang patisevati. That deed is well done when after having done it one regrets not, and when with joy and pleasure one reaps the fruit thereof. The strong devotion of a florist, Sumana. A florist named Sumana had to supply King Bimbisara of Rajagha with jasmine flowers every morning. One morning, on his way to the king's palace, Sumana, on seeing the Buddha coming into town for alms food, accompanied by many bhikkhus, felt a strong desire to offer his flowers to him. At once he decided that even if the king were to drive him out of the country or to kill him, he would offer the flowers to the Buddha instead. Thus, with utmost devotion, he offered all his flowers. As the Buddha proceeded with the bhikkhus and surrounded by the flowers, thousands of people came out to pay homage to the Buddha. As for Sumana, his entire body was suffused with delightful satisfaction or piety. Sumana's wife then reported to the king that she had nothing to do with her husband's failure to deliver the flowers at the palace. In fact, the king was happy with the offering of flowers to the enlightened one. The king also took the opportunity to offer alms food to the Buddha and his bhikkhus. After the meal, the Buddha returned to the Jetavana monastery. Then, King Bimbisara summoned Sumana to the palace. The king praised Sumana for his great devotion to the Buddha. The king also applauded his bravery in offering the flowers, and to show his appreciation, gave him a big reward. At the Jetavana monastery, when asked by Venerable Ananda what benefits Sumana would gain by his good deed done on that day, the Buddha explained that Sumana, who without any consideration for his own safety in offering the flowers, would not be reborn in any of the 4 lower forms of existence, or apaya. Eventually, one day he would gain release from the unsatisfactory state of existence. Verse 69. Evil-doers come to grief. Madhuva manyati balo yava papang na pacchati yadacha pacchati papang atha balo dukhang nigacchati. As sweet as honey is an evil deed, so thinks the fool, so long as it ripens not. But when it ripens, then he comes to grief. The young man who molested a nun, Uppalavanna. Once there was a young daughter of a well-known family in Savatthi. Because she was so beautiful, with looks so tender and sweet, like a lotus flower, she was called Uppalavanna. The fame of her beauty spread far and wide, and there were many suitors, princes, rich men, and many others. But she decided that it would be better for her to become a bhikkhuni, a female member of the holy order. One day, after lighting a lamp, she kept her mind fixed on the flame and meditating on the fire kasina as an object of concentration. She attained arahanthood. Some time later, she moved to the forest and lived in solitude. While she was out on her alms round, Nanda, her cousin, came to her hut and hid himself underneath her couch. Nanda had fallen in love with her before she became a bhikkhuni, and now his intention was to take her by force. When Uppalavanna returned, she saw Nanda and said, "Do not be foolish, do not harm, do not molest." But he would not be stopped. After satisfying himself, he left her. For this terrible deed of molesting a holy person, he had to suffer for a long period. When he heard of this incident, the Buddha sent for King Pasenadi of Kosala and told him about the dangers and difficulties that bhikkhunis living in forests had to face from irresponsible persons. The king then built monasteries for bhikkhunis within the city. From that time on, bhikkhunis resided only within the city. Verse 70. Realization is far superior to mere fasting. Mase mase kusajjena balo bunjitha bhojanang naso sankhata dhammanang kalang ajjhati solasing. Month after month, a fool may eat only as much as food as can be picked up on the tip of a kusa grass blade. But he is not worth a 16th part of those who have comprehended the truth. The ascetic who deceived others. Jambuka. Jambuka was the son of a rich man in Savatthi. Due to his past evil deeds, he was born with very peculiar habits. As a child, he wanted to sleep on the floor with no proper bed, and preferred to take his own feces for food instead of rice. When he grew older, his parents sent him to the ascetics. When those ascetics found out about his peculiar habits, they drove him away. At night he ate human feces, and in the daytime he stood still on one leg and kept his mouth open. He used to say that he kept his mouth open because he only lived on air, and that he stood on one leg because he was too heavy for the earth to bear him. "I never sit down. I never go to sleep," he boasted. Many people believed him, and some would come to him with offerings. Jambuka would refuse them and say, "I don't take any food except air." When entreated, he would take just a little bit of food with the tip of a blade of grass and say, "Now go, this little will give you enough merit." In this way, Jambuka lived for many years, naked and taking feces in secret. One day, however, the Buddha saw in his vision that Jambuka would be able to attain arahanthood within a short time. So, in the evening, he went to see Jambuka and asked for a place to spend the night. Jambuka pointed out to him a mountain cave where he himself was staying. When the Buddha was resting there, the devas came to pay homage to him. The forest was lit up with their radiance, and Jambuka saw the light. In the morning he went to the Buddha and inquired about the brightness. When told about the devas who had come to pay homage to the Buddha, Jambuka was very much impressed and remarked, "You must indeed be a spiritually great person for the devas to come and pay homage to you. As for me, even though I have practiced austerity for 55 years, living only on air and standing only on one leg, none of the devas have ever come to me." The Buddha replied, "O Jambuka, you have been deceiving others, but you cannot deceive me. I know that for many years you have been eating feces and sleeping on the ground." Furthermore, the Buddha explained to him how in one of his past existences, during the time of Kassapa Buddha, Jambuka had prevented a monk from going to the house of a devotee where alms food was being given, and how he had also thrown away the food that was sent with him for that monk. It was because of these evil deeds that he had such peculiar habits of eating feces and sleeping on the bare ground. Jambuka then realized his mistake and deeply regretted having deceived other people. He went down on his knees, and the Buddha gave him a piece of cloth to cover himself. The Buddha then delivered a discourse. At the end of the discourse, Jambuka attained arahanthood and joined the holy order on the spot. Soon after this, Jambuka's pupils also arrived, and they were surprised to see their teacher with the Buddha. Bhikkhu Jambuka then announced he had joined the holy order, and that he was now only a disciple of the Enlightened One. The Buddha explained to them that although their teacher had practiced various austerities, it was not worth even 1/16th part of his present practice and achievement. Verse 71. Evil takes effect at the opportune moment. Nahi papang katang kammang sajju khirang va mucchati dahantang balang anveti basmachanno va pavako. An evil deed does not immediately bear fruit. just as milk does not curdle at once, but it follows the fool, burning him like live coal covered with ashes. A ghost with a human head and snake's body. On one occasion, Venerable Mahamoggallana was going on alms round with Venerable Lakkana in Rajagha. On seeing something strange, he smiled, but said nothing. When they were back at the monastery, Venerable Mahamoggallana explained to Lakkana that he had smiled because he had seen a Peta ghost with the head of a human being and the body of a snake. The Buddha then added that he himself had seen that very Peta, or hungry ghost, on the day he attained Buddhahood. The Buddha then revealed that a very long time ago there was a Pacceka Buddha, or a silent Buddha. People going to his monastery had to pass through a field. The owner of the field, fearing that his field would be damaged by too many people going to and from the monastery, set fire to it. Consequently, the Pacceka Buddha had to move to some other place. The supporters of the Pacceka Buddha got very angry with the landowner, beat him, and as a result of the beating, he died. Because of his bad kamma, he was reborn to suffer as a Peta ghost. In conclusion, the Buddha said, an evil deed does not bear fruit immediately, but it invariably follows the evil-doer. There is no escape from the consequences of an evil deed. A note from the author. When Arahants and Buddhas smile, it is not an expression of humor. Rather, it is a sign to whoever is with them to question them on what prompted the smile. Verse 72. Knowledge and fame tend to ruin the fools. Yavadeva anathaya nyattam bālasya jayati honti bālasya sukkam sang muddhang assa vipātayang. The skill of a fool can only harm him. It destroys his merit and his wisdom. Literally, it severs his head. Be careful in actions. On another occasion, Venerable Mahamoggallana saw a Peta, or hungry ghost, while going on an alms round with Venerable Lakkana. The Buddha revealed that this particular Peta, or ghost, named Satthikuta, in one of his previous existences, was very skillful in throwing stones at things. One day, he asked permission from his teacher to try out his skill. His teacher told him not to hit a cow, or a human being, as he would have to pay compensation to the owner or to the relative, but to find some other target. On seeing a holy person on his alms round, this foolish man thought that this would be an ideal target, because he had no relative or guardian and was not a cow either. So he threw a stone and killed the holy man. In turn, the public became angry and killed the man. Because of this evil deed, he was reborn in a miserable state for a long period of time. In his present existence, he was reborn as a Peta ghost whose head was continuously being hit with red-hot hammers. On this occasion, the Buddha said, "To a fool, his skill or knowledge is of no use. It can only harm him." A note from the author. Buddhism teaches that there are 31 states of existence into which beings are reborn according to their kamma. When they die, rebirth takes place in one of these 31 states of existence, according to their own good or bad kamma. And among these 31 states of existence, there are 4 miserable states called the lower worlds of misery. These are 1. The animal world, or Tirachina Yoni; 2. The ghost worlds, or Peta Yoni; 3. The demon worlds, or Asura Yoni; and 4. The hells, or Niraya, literally the downward path, or the nether or infernal world, usually translated as hell. Verses 73 and 74. The ignorant seek undue fame. Asatang bhavanang ichcheya purikharancha bhikkhu so avasesu cha issariyang puja parakulesu cha mang eva kata manyantu gihi pabbajita ubho mam evativasa asu kicha kichesu kismichi iti Bālassa sankappo icchamano chavadhati. The foolish bhikkhu desires praise for qualities he does not have, precedence among bhikkhus, authority in the monasteries, and veneration from those unrelated to him. Let both laymen and bhikkhus think that things are done because of me. Let them obey me in all matters, great and small. Such being the thoughts of the fool, his greed and his pride grow. A lay disciple and a stubborn monk, Chitta and Suddhamma. Chitta, a householder, once met Venerable Mahanama, one of the first 5 disciples of the Buddha, going on an alms round, and invited the monk to his house. There he offered alms food to him, and after listening to the discourse given by him, Chitta realized the Dhamma. Later, Chitta built a monastery in his mango grove. There he looked to the needs of all the bhikkhus who came to the monastery, and one bhikkhu, Suddhamma, was installed as the resident bhikkhu. One day, the 2 chief disciples of the Buddha, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana, came to the monastery. After listening to the discourse given by Sariputta, Chitta attained the 3rd stage of sainthood. Then he invited Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana to his house for alms food the next day. He also invited Suddhamma, who refused in anger and said, "You invited me only after the other 2. Chitta repeated his invitation, but it was again turned down. Nevertheless, Suddhamma went to the house of Chitta early on the following day. But when invited to enter the house, he refused and said that he would not sit down as he was going on his alms round. But when he saw the things that were to be offered to the monks, he envied them so much that he could not restrain his anger. He abused Chitta and said, "I don't want to stay in your monastery any longer," and left the house in anger. Suddhamma reported everything that had happened to the Buddha, who said, "You have offended a lay disciple who is endowed with faith and generosity. You must go back to him and own up your mistake." Suddhamma did as he was told, but Chitta felt he should be made to realize his mistake and therefore did not accept his apology. Suddhamma went to see the Buddha for the 2nd time. Then the Buddha said, "My son, a good bhikkhu should have no attachment. A good bhikkhu should not be conceited and say, 'This is my monastery, this is my place, these are my lay disciples, etc.' For in one with such thoughts, covetousness and pride will increase." At the end of the admonition, Suddhamma went to the house of Chitta, and this time they were reconciled, and within a few days Suddhamma attained arahanthood. Verse 75. The path to gain is one, and the path to Nibbāna is another. Anyahi labhu panisa, anya Nibbāna gamini, evang etang abhinyaya, Bhikkhu buddhassa savako, sakkarang nabhinandeya, vivekang anubhruvaye. Surely, the path that leads to worldly gain is one, and the path that leads to Nibbāna is another. Understanding this, the Bhikkhu, the disciple of the Buddha, should not rejoice in worldly favors, but cultivate detachment. A novice monk who won all hearts, Tissa. Tissa was the son of a well-known man from Savatthi. His father used to offer alms food to Venerable Sariputta in his house, and so even as a child, Tissa had met Venerable Sariputta on many occasions. At the age of 7, he became a novice monk under Venerable Sariputta. While he was staying at the Jetavana monastery, many of his friends and relatives came to see him, bringing presents and offerings. The novice found these visits to be very tiresome. So, after taking a subject of meditation from the Buddha, he left for a forest monastery. Whenever a villager offered him anything, Tissa would just say, "May you be happy, may you be liberated from the ills of life," and would go on his way. While he stayed at the forest monastery, he ardently and diligently practiced meditation, and at the end of 3 months he attained sainthood. After the Vassa retreat, Sariputta, accompanied by Venerable Moggallana and other senior disciples, paid a visit to Tissa. The villagers requested Venerable Sariputta to deliver a discourse, but he declined. Instead, he directed his pupil Tissa to deliver it. The villagers, however, said that Tissa could only say, "May you be happy, may you be liberated from the ills of life," and asked Venerable Sariputta to assign another bhikkhu in his place. But Venerable Sariputta insisted that Tissa should deliver the discourse. Thus, in obedience to his teacher, Tissa went up the platform and delivered his discourse. Dawn was approaching when he finished his exposition, and Venerable Sariputta applauded Tissa for having expounded the Dhamma so well. The villagers, too, were very much impressed. They were surprised that Tissa knew the Dhamma so well and considered themselves lucky to have Tissa amongst them. Some, on the other hand, were disappointed with him for not having preached the Dhamma to them in the past. The Buddha, with his supernatural power, saw these two groups of villagers from the Jetavana monastery and appeared before them so that he could clear up the misunderstanding amongst the villagers. The Buddha arrived while the villagers were preparing alms food for the bhikkhus. So they had the opportunity to offer alms food to the Buddha as well. After the meal, the Buddha addressed the villagers. "O devotees, all of you are so lucky to have Tissa amongst you. It is on account of his presence here that I myself, my chief disciples, senior disciples, and many other bhikkhus now pay you a visit." These words made them realize how fortunate they were to have Tissa with them, and they did not waste time thinking about what had happened in the past.